Click, buy, deliver with the two-time Motorcycle News Dealer of the Year, Colchester Kawasaki. Proud sponsors of Chasing the Racing.
3, 2, 1, and welcome back to Chasing the Racing, episode 86. And we're delighted to be joined by Leon Haslam. How are you?
Good, mate. It's been weird, a long off season, a weird year. Kind of not quite sure where it's going to kick off again, but it is what it is, and we're doing what we can, and it's been a fun year as well.
Mm-hmm. How lucky are we though? Because you're not supposed to be here at all, are you? You're supposed to be in a much better country, a much hotter one at that. You're supposed to be in Spain right now.
Yeah, I'm normally in Spain pretty much the whole of January, doing all the things like flat tracking, motocrossing, getting it out of the system, better training and stuff. But like I say, so weird. We normally train through December, January. We're always in Australia for round one in February. Where this year, I don't think we start till late April. And been twiddling the thumbs pretty much most of the winter and not wanting to kick off too early. You don't want to get burnt out before the season starts.
So when does the MotoGP start? Because your BSB season starts in May. Doesn't it? And you're saying late April for Australia. Yeah. Is that Australia?
No, only Europe. So we're in Assen, actually, the first round. So.
Right. So what's happening with the MotoGP calendar?
I think it's due to start end of March still. So
right. Are they going for the full reach on that again? Because they had a full championship MotoGP, didn't they?
I think they're trying to. Again, it's going to be subject to travel restrictions. It's all seemed to kicked off again, and it's
they're a lot more serious in terms of like the testing. So when the teams got to the tracks, I think they were real strict in terms of bubbles and stuff. And then they had tests because obviously Rossi missed I think 2 races didn't he for a COVID test. Was World Superbikes a little bit like that in terms of?
Yeah, I don't think it was quite as strict, but you had to have a PCR test before arriving. HRC insisted on it, and also on arrival you had all the temperature checks and you had to show that you'd been tested, etc. So I know MotoGP was, there was testing at the circuit. They was getting the results turned around in 24 hours. So they had quite a big procedure. But yeah, definitely had a lot of swabs and things stuck up my nose over the last 9 months. But
stuck up something. I'm glad you said your nose and cleared that up for everyone on listening this.
We've, like Dom said, obviously we're sort of lucky in the fact that you're not in Spain, so we've got a chance to do an interview because it's with this show we've been we'll just sort of pick people who we've got a big list of people who we're trying to sort of get on, and from day one you've kind of been like near the top of the list, but you're just never in the country and you're so busy and stuff, so it's kind of a little bit of a blessing. But from like the whole time I've been interested in bikes, that kind of is your career span. From I remember years and years ago from I think it was my dad's 40th, we got him a day at the Ron Haslam race school, and when I was into BSB then, but I was like a proper little lad, and I remember seeing you would probably have only been sort of 18, 19 then. And then obviously I've sort of followed your whole racing career through sort of BSB, World Superbikes, but at that point, I think you were maybe in the Grand Prix or back in Superbikes, but was it... I had a quick look through there on Wikipedia at your things, and you didn't take like much of like you weren't in racing long before you were straight in at the deep end, were you? And obviously with your dad being,
your dad.
Yeah, your dad.
There wasn't much of a learning curve. I kind of got dragged through it, I think, the first few years, but...
Growing up, was that was your dad still racing all the way from when you were sort of growing up as a kid?
Yeah, so I think I went to my first Grand Prix at 6 weeks old. So from pretty much when I was born, my dad was doing Grand Prix. So kind of grew up in the paddock, which I've got some mega memories. When my dad was with Rothman's Honda, Elf Honda, teammates to Swans with Suzuki. I remember playing PlayStation with Alex Barros in his motorhome because he was only 19 when he was in Grand Prix, and I'd have probably been, 4 or 5. So pretty much after every session I was in his motorhome playing on the PlayStation and whatever. So yeah, some mega memories from that era. And then when I got of age, probably 7 or 8, my dad come back to the UK, racing in British Championship. And that's when I started motocross. So, my kind of racing on bikes, kind of riding around paddocks from 4 years old, but racing from when I was about 8. And then, from, I think it was 97, I started off in the Scooter Championship. And by 2000, I progressed from a scooter to World 125s, racing against Rossi and all the boys. So
was the motocross thing a deliberate, like,
class,
do you think your dad had visions of you racing on the tarmac later in life, but sort of started you off with motocross to like get them sort of skills, or were you sort of driven to be a motocross racer, and then like what was
I used to love motocross, the whole thing, the riding after school every night, just on a little field at home and stuff. And I think my dad didn't want me to race at all. It was quite unique in the fact that he really tried to put me off. He made sure that I wanted it. And I lost 2 British championships through breaking my leg at the very last round both years. And I remember the second time that I broke my leg, it's been documented, but he literally come to me and said, "Oh, we can't afford to race anymore. You're going to have to stop." I was big into football. I was into a lot of other stuff at the time. And, I proper kicked off. For me, that's all I ever wanted to do. And he never really pushed, or I felt like he supported me in them early years. But I think because I kicked off, from that point onwards, he did actually start to know that I wanted it for myself, and he kind of backed me up a little bit. So that was also the same transition from motocross to road racing. So when he started to supporting me, he started to create the opportunities for me to go road racing. But up until that point, I was pretty much, it was just me wanting to ride every night. It was me that was asking. It was me that was pushing, sort of thing.
Because that's, like you say, well documented. And there was a Netflix documentary called Speed Is My Need, and it follows your British title run and everything. I think it was a fantastic documentary. And for me, that very much separated you and your father. If you know what I mean? Like that particular scene you're talking about, like the fact that he went, "Look, your dad just said, we're going to act skinned and just say you're not doing it anymore." And you made your own right up on that. But the one thing I didn't know, 8-year-old is when you first started racing. In today's money, that's late.
Yeah.
When you think about it, compared to like, we've got one of our mates, Sugar Tits. You've obviously heard of him. He's a legend. But his son,
obviously,
everyone's heard of Sugar Tits because he's acting coy. He's like, I don't want to blush. But it's his lad. Well, he started off, he could barely walk, and he was on a motocross bike. So why? Like you say, you've been travelling the world, but it was literally from paddock bikes. Got home and went.
Yeah, I think the fact that from when I was born until I was 7, my dad was doing World Championship. He was in the Grand Prix. So when I rode bikes, it was literally around paddocks and in fields at circuits. You know what I mean?
You just had no opportunity to actually have a go at it. That's
not for racing. And then as soon as he come back, that's when I said, "Can I have a go at racing?" And then that was kind of when I started the motocross scene. So yeah.
And at one point in your career, was it when your dad retired?
Yeah, my dad's still riding now. But,
Good lad. That's
actually seen. Do you know when we're out in Cartagena last year and with the academy, and your dad was? I seen your dad in leathers, and I thought you might be just doing like little things, but he went out and he came in. Everyone was around and like sort of setting the bike up for the kids. And honestly, we actually spoke about it on the podcast, just saying that passion has just never faded away. Like
a proper racer doesn't retire. That's my opinion.
I agree.
That's the thing. You got lads going, "Well, I'm packing in. It's like, well, you don't, do you? My old man still races bikes, and people that don't, like Steve Plater, I remember having he was absolutely wankered in the anchor bar, and he goes, "Well, a proper racer doesn't retire," and it's stuck with me. And that your dad's obviously still in that category.
If I've got the same passion he has at 64 that he is now, it's phenomenal. The energy that he's got. We still trial together, we still pit bike together. The race schools, we have so much fun.
Your dad on a pit bike.
I absolutely loves it. I took him to the hospital last year from a broken collarbone still from pit biking.
Up at Knock Hill, the go-kart track around the back of Knock Hill on BSB weekend, and your dad was just hammering it.
I remember we went up a day earlier just so we could pit bike together.
All right, this is a bit of fun. Let's go back to BSB because that's the only thing I really properly know about. If you put your dad out on track now, where do you think you'd sit? Like, let's pick a class for try options. Ducati try options. You put your dad on that. Where do you think you'd finish?
I think, on those stock sort of bikes, I know he's real competitive. I race him on the race school, and, I've had all sorts of guys there, Johnny Ray, the Lowe's boys, and John McGuinness, all the top level sort of riders from England, and we go on their little 125s, and no one can get close to him. We've had world level 400 riders come and to the race school to learn Donington, and my dad's faster than them, and they're winning at world level still. And I'm like, it's frustrating for me because obviously that's all he rides day in day out, so I have to kind of get my finger out just to try and keep up with him. So yeah, honestly the passion and everything that he's got, and I've got topside of him now on the bigger bikes, but
do you just push him off the table at Christmas? That's my seat, Dad. Just piss off there, top of the table.
100%, mate. You know, it's proper competition between us.
When do you think the sort of balance of that sort of balance of power, in the family? When was it sort of firmly established that you were faster?
Honestly,
18.
It wasn't even that long ago. You know,
really?
No, because all the way through, he has been a massive help. You know, he's helped me, he's supported me, and I know what he's saying is relevant. You know what I mean? And he has been up to speed. He's kept up to date. You know, he's tested MotoGP bikes recently and everything else with Honda. So I know he's up to speed. He understands the electronics, etc. But from a riding point of view, you know, we still have a big arguments. But at the same time, I know what he's saying. It's obviously based off of real time stuff, not what happened 30 years ago when he used to race sort of thing. So yeah,
he's keeping his eye. No, but he's dodged me question though, right? Donington Park, try options. Where would he finish?
I still think he'd be in the top 3, 100%. I know that for a fact.
Imagine Stuart Higgs listens to this, My God, then there'll be phone calls still like that around the table tonight. Right, how much? I know. Imagine that. It would be incredible.
Talking about the passion, it's great to see all the way through your career. Your dad's always with you in the box, and I know he plays a big part as a sort of spotter, and he's out there with the cameras. And do you still feel like, is that like a sort of secret weapon for you? Do you feel like having that sort of knowledge?
Massively. You know, any team that I've been in, he's not a sort of person it would help anybody. You know what I mean? He has a queue of riders outside the motorhome every weekend asking for advice, which is the sort of person that just loves that. And
but surely you have the same though.
A little bit now. You know, I've got a lot of young riders. I've got a lot of people that are coming to me, and I think I have that same passion. You know, I love helping riders, and I look at Rossi with what he's done with the camp, and the inspiration that the younger riders give me. You know, to go out flat tracking, to have that competition, and me and my dad are not necessarily a father and son. It's more of a friendship. You know, it's I want to beat him as much as he wants to beat me, and I'll T-bone him just as on as anybody else on the last lap, sort of thing. And
just talking about the kids lineup, I've been one of those people. I remember when I first stepped into Superbikes, I was straight at your camera door,
and he just looked at you, just fuck off.
No, very, very kind.
Can you not see I'm busy?
But I mean, you see your dad all the time with the camera and making a big effort in it. And obviously it's great having the academy that's, like you say, a little bit like the VR46, and hopefully when not retired, but like maybe not on your way down, sort of passing all that knowledge on to the next generation, it'll be. And for those kids as well, it's like such a massive inspiration, but also a big sort of help having you on board.
For my side, it's good because I've got 8 young kids that I'm training with, I'm doing fitness tests with, get them out to Spain for flat tracking. So I'm doing it regardless because it's what I do for my training program, and to have some young guys to help and to show them, you don't just sit at home for 9 months and for the next race, you've got to kind of put yourself in a training program, a bit about diet, all that sort of stuff, which, it's not really, it's not a big thing in the UK. A lot of people kind of rock up round by round, and they don't understand the prep that to be at a world level that actually goes into all that. So just to offer that as a visual, this is what you should be doing. I can't make them do it, I can't make them want it, but at the same time let them come along and experience that. And I have produced a team which I'm not too hands-on with that. I've got John Laverty that manages that for me, Kawasaki support that, that's kind of run by itself. But my side as the academy, helping young riders, I've already got 3 or 4 of my riders plated and pinned up with surgeons that I'm really in contact with. I've got real top trainers, I've got nutritionists, and just kind of offering that a little bit. I think it's a big thing that they miss a lot of the people.
Do you still work with Kirk and train with the Lowe's boys and Ty? And there's a proper good group of you there, isn't it? The gym, and I've been there for a fitness test, and I know what Kirk, and obviously I think on that Speed Is My Need, Kirk's on that, isn't he?
Yeah.
And it doesn't take. As soon as you meet him, you see exactly what he's about, and you
do as you're told.
He sets a great
more reps.
A great role model for all the athletes, and
he's regardless of how fit you get, I know that he's fitter than everyone else. So it definitely motivates you. And it's been weird with the lockdown. It's the first time that I've not spent 5 days a week with him. It's been phone calls and a bit of Zoom calls and everything else. And luckily I've got a bit of a structure where been able to maintain it myself. But to have someone like him in your corner and the expertise and the knowledge that he's helped me with, and still is, you know what I mean, he's going to be up, hopefully, you know, doing a bit of Zoom calls with a few of my riders, and obviously me, the Lowe's boys, Tommy Sill, Motocrossing. There's a good bunch of lads, and you know, when it does get back to normal and you can all be there in competition and spare each other on, you know, that's kind of what it's about.
I was just going to get at that. Between all of the lads, I think that's someone's. Is that your phone or mine? Between all of the lads that train there,
I have no idea where that is.
Must be coming from.
It's coming from somewhere. Sorry.
Between all the lads that train there, you know, between sort of Ty and Tommy and different sort of disciplines, it must get competitive. Is there much like who would you say is the all round fittest? Or
honestly, everyone's so different in all the different areas. It's so strange, you know. A lot of people look like Tommy's like big into his cycling. He's actually really good, you know, at swimming and stuff like that. You know, Alex is really strong. You know, he's put a lot of effort into his training. They've always been fit, the Lowe's boys, and they've worked really hard, and the levels that they've got to is so strong. You know, Sam's a really strong runner. Alex is a strong cyclist.
Do you have your different strengths?
Yeah.
Do you play golf?
Yeah, I love golf.
Let's talk about the golf thing. I think you've gone from the world's most extreme sport, world's best sport, and the golf thing. But do you reckon that's calmed you? What is it about golfing? We've gone from chasing the racing podcast, motorbike podcast, to Tiger Woods here.
I got into golf because it does get you out of your head. It's 4 hours out of your day, you know, going for a walk. It's competitive as hell. No matter how good of a game you have, you can always do better. You know, you can't master golf ever. So I think it's that mind over matter, getting out of your own head. You know,
what do you play off?
About 9 at the minute. But me, Sam, and Alex all play off very similar. So
I was about to say, because there seems to be more and more riders. That's why I asked the question. That seem to be getting into it. I thought, like, you know, the psychological battle of racing. But you've just explained it on that side of things.
I've always done it, and it's something that I've tried to do every Thursday before a race. So you know, it's something that can get to a racetrack, go and have your game of golf, clear your mind, and you can kind of enter
routines.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, if you want to beat you at like world superbike level, you go to the golf course beforehand, bray the fuck out of you, and then you got a chance of beating you.
Yeah, me and Alex has had some definitely more arguments and battles on the golf course than we ever have on the racetrack. So,
really?
Yeah, it's a good healthy competition we've got between us all, and it's good fun as well.
But even going back one, have you, in the lockdown situation, the sport, everything, blah blah blah, the whole country, have you enjoyed that little bit of break from really being from 6 weeks old in a paddock? Have you ever had a break as a family and everything from sport?
It's been weird because, you know, it has been restricted. It's been long and frustrating at times, but from my perspective, at the end of 19, I was really injured when I was with KRT. I had 3 or 4 operations on my ankle. I had an operation on my back. I was, you know, it's my big opportunity going back to the World Championship with the factory team, and I was just pretty much injured the whole year. And the end of 19, it was the first ever time in my whole career that I've not had an operation in the December. I've always had December of fixing something up or getting something mended. Right. And that was the first time in my whole career I didn't have an operation. So the 19 winter was the best I've ever had. We went to Australia with a new bike, new project, and then it went into lockdown for 3 months. So I had 3 months of, I've never had 3 months. I've never had more than 6 weeks of non-testing or racing, and I had 3 months of cycling, being at home, you know, dedicating myself to be fitter, healthier, and it's the lightest I've ever been coming out of lockdown. It's the fittest I've ever been, and then it was kind of crammed a whole season into 3 months where I had some big crashes last year, you know what I mean? So I've kind of come out of the year with no major injuries. I've had no operations again this winter, and I've had like 4 or 5 months to actually try and plan how I want to attack 2021. And the fact that I've not been injured, the fact that I've not had to have operations, and I can work on myself a little bit, and you know, I'm not getting any younger as well, so I've got to do it in a more, I would say, precise way. You know, I mean, I can't just bosh out 10 miles every day running because my knees and joints don't allow it anymore. So it has got to be a little bit more planned out, and the fact that I've had the time to do that with lockdown, the fact that I'm not going to be racing until April, it's actually been quite positive from my perspective.
Yeah, you had a mega pre-season last year in the testing and stuff, and I think obviously everyone was looking at brand new Honda, everyone was sort of excited, and I think from the form of Bautista the year before, I think everyone was kind of expecting Bautista to be maybe challenging for wins or whatever.
That's from the Ducati thing,
you absolutely smoked him on every test, first round, and you really looking back, you weren't far off the podium at all, were you, in that first round?
I crashed out of the podium way too too many times. I crashed too many times, and Alvaro did as well. I actually finished on the exact same points as him at the end of the year, which was weird because, like I say, every test I was faster. And for me, it wasn't even about the end result. It wasn't even about anything else. It was, he jumped on the Ducati last year and won 15, 16 races. First ever year on a bike. So he was expected to win. I wasn't. I was there. I knew my role. I knew I could be competitive. I knew that my development and testing side was a key factor. I knew Suzuku 8 Hour was a key factor. But the fact that I was actually quicker than him and I actually was beating him, I was already well ahead of what I was employed to do. So actually, I didn't expect to have a future year if I didn't achieve those results. And because I did, that's why I've got a second opportunity to, in my opinion, to actually not be just a test rider and a second rider, but to actually go and be competitive and win, which for me is exciting. The project's so exciting. The potential is massive. And in all fairness, the whole COVID thing and the short season hindered Honda probably the most. We needed to test, we needed to do development, and we had zero. So from, in my opinion, from the first round to the last round, in a 3-month period, we had nothing that improved because we couldn't test, we couldn't try things. And when we did, it was at a race weekend, which, as you know, 2 40-minute sessions and then you expect to qualify and race, you just can't develop and test. It's impossible. So
do you think the bike will be much different for next year?
Yeah, well, we're testing at the end of January, and for me that's the big one. Hopefully we've got a few of the items that we've been looking forward to try and test. We had a really good test at the end of November we didn't try nothing new, but we evaluated what we had in that year, and we actually was only a couple of tenths off the fastest. We had quite a stable bike at that test, so even if nothing changes, a second year on the same bike with the same team, we're already going to be more ahead. And I believe Honda and HRC as a company, they are going to bring the thing to make that next step to as well. So
what was interesting for me when the new Honda came out is, quite frankly, across the whole board, BSB, Worlds, you had heavy hitters from the word go, Bautista, yourself, and you think, was there something behind that sales pitch? Hondas haven't done anything for a long time, have they? That's the truth of the fact. And then this year, it just seems to all work.
Especially in BSB, it came out the first round was ridiculous.
The standard bike's phenomenal. I went out and did the blade launch in Doha beginning of last year, and it was a bog standard bike, bog standard gearing, standard exhaust, everything. All we did was put the Pirelli Corsa tyres on it, and I did a 159 round Doha on a bog standard bike, which was faster than what I lapped on the last lap of the race when I rode for KLT on a factory superbike. And that's around a 2-minute lap circuit, you know what I mean? So
I remember Glenn mentioning the fact how fast you were at that test.
Well, there was a good funny story actually with Glenn, because he'd been there 2 days prior to me, and he got down to a 2:04 or something. I forget the lap times now, but he got down to a really competitive time, which me and Johnny did on the original blade launch 5-6 years prior to that. I was like, it must be good. I remember how hard I used to push to get to a 2:04 on a standard bike, and me and Alvaro and I think it was Dominic Agata, there's a few of us, and you're supposed to have 2 tyres for the whole day. I think we had 6 tyres a day throwing, just getting a lap time on these standard bikes. And yeah, we got to a 159. It was honestly, it shocked the hell out of me how competitive that was. And converting that into a race bike is another story, but the base of what the blade is phenomenal.
Have you ever had an experience like that where you've come to a new bike as a rider and think you've got on a standard bike or the superbike and gone, I don't like it? Has that ever happened to you? And you've had to, as a professional, you've had to go, I have to change this to make it work.
Yeah, I really struggled with the BMW initially.
Right.
When I got on it in 2011, I got off the Suzuki, which was a very old bike. It was pretty much planted. The setup worked everywhere, and we finished second in the world that year. It was amazing. Went to a BMW, everything was thrown at it. The standard road bike was phenomenal. It was winning everything in stock. It was the bike to be on.
So what year was this then?
2011, actually.
2011, right, yeah.
11 and 12.
Was that like the Gen 1 or Gen 2? Or it was the early...
It was the early one. It was, I think it was its 3rd year in its project, because it was Corsa and Zaus for 2 years, and then I come on with Corsa for my first year in 11. And
because the BMs upgrade quicker than iPhones, don't they? They seem to keep bouncing along.
Technically, they're really good. I think from turning it into a race bike and those fundamentals is what it missed then. The second year I was teammates to Melandri, which, in all fairness, the bike didn't really change too much. Exactly.
All I'm thinking is the Donington last BMW one for a 1-2 in World Superbikes at Donington last corner.
Absolute freak, wasn't it?
And
Straight up,
it's sort of like Johnny skittled Milan. Well, Johnny like sort of knocked Melandri off, and that for me, that's the worst corner in British racing. I hate
that
Goddard's.
corner as well.
It's off camber. It's like it's just horrible.
10 meters away from the first win with BMW.
I mean, the favourite thing about that footage is the replay, and then they block changed the shot straight to your face, standing up, and you could just see pure rage.
I had your replica helmet on as well, and there's actually a video on YouTube of the video in the garage, and obviously the garage reaction for that. But I can't even imagine what that would have. I think I was there that year. But just we sort of touched on it, and I want to just before we move on, I just wanted to quickly ask you about the race school. Is obviously there was news out that it was all closing. Was it this year just gone?
Yeah, just finished at the end of last year.
Is there any plans for it to come back? Or
my dad will do something. It was more of a decision of the climate and Honda and the commitment to have Donington for the 20 days. It's a big whole commitment. So for me, they'll do something. There's a lot of talks with what he might do and not do. He'll definitely be on bikes somewhere, hopefully at Donington, with it being my local circuit. But there's talks of maybe doing something on the road as a teaching race school type thing, and there's also talks from my side of it. From the Learn to Ride. It's something that we do a lot with the race school, getting the young riders coming through and just getting really new people on bikes. You don't need a license, you don't need leathers, you don't need anything. You can take 12-year-olds and put them on a little 125 and and teach them how to ride. For me, that's what we need to push more. Get new people on bikes, and that's something that we've done for 25 years through the race school. And if we can do that a little bit more, for me, that's where it's missing.
It's a hell of a legacy to let go of, after all those years of teaching people how to race. It would be a shame, wouldn't it?
Do you know, if you just add up all of the like thousands of people over the years, that the first sort of introduction to the best sport, best hobby in the world, and it's all sort of down to like you and your family. It's
we've had a lot of interest from a lot of different manufacturers to support it. We've had a lot of interest from various people to like not run it, but to take it on and stuff like that. So my dad's he's not getting any younger either. He does want to do it. He won't stop riding. He will be teaching in some fashion, but figuring out how to do that at the minute is kind of where they're at.
Cool. Now one thing, I had loads of like little ideas that I wanted to touch upon, and one of my earliest memories was of a race win back at Croft, and it was a wet race, and I remember watching. I was either there or watching it on TV, and I think it was Carl Harris who was leading by miles, and then all of a sudden you started taking like massive time, and it was one of those races where you're trying to predict, will he catch him, will he not catch him, and it was looking at like it was a possibility. And I'm just off memory, I'm sure the commentators were talking about, did Carl used to live at your house, or do you want to tell us about that?
Me and Carl, obviously he passed a few years back at the Isle of Man, but we was probably the closest I've ever been with anybody. He was like, he lived in the house for 4 years, and even when he left and he moved on to World Championship and all the stuff that he got up to, we kept in touch. We played golf 3-4 times a week. We cycled together. It was really, really close. But the competition and the arguments and the fighting that we had as two best mates, words can't describe it. It was intense. But that's the relationship we had. It was great, and to beat him on the last lap, and bearing in mind he'd not won a British Championship race at that stage as well. So it was. I can remember as I come into Park Ferme and he just punched me. It was. It was one of those races. It was a special moment for sure.
How come did he move in with your family?
My dad was running a team, Team Great Britain, and we took him from motocross to road racing in the Super Teen Championship of all championships. So Carl was always a big stocky sort of person, and we took him into Super Teens, and then we moved him up to 250s and other classes that he did with us, and that's kind of where it stemmed from. But I remember Carl as a motocrosser, and there was nobody like it, the natural talent of him, and he used to rock up on a British Championship race, and you call nuns and all your top level sort of riders, and you wouldn't do practice because if you turned up early and scrutineered, you had to supply a marshal. So if you missed practice, you didn't have to do any of that. So he'd miss the practice, rock up, just go on the grid and absolutely blitz everyone by half a lap, and he had everyone just watching him all of the jumps, because like the jumps was his thing. And for me, we did a thing called Super Champs. I think I was like 6 years old, and that's when I first met Carl and all his family. And yeah, for me, that's kind of where the relationship began between me and Carl. We took him then from motocross to road racing, and you know, kind of went from there.
I think I was down at Facati the other day, and I was speaking to a guy, like a suspension guy, and he's actually helping Carl's son, who's doing
Carl, as well.
Is it called Carl as well? Yeah. And I think he races with our friend Sugar Tits' son. But mega.
So, if you don't mind me asking, what, like, when the news got to you at the Isle of Man and everything like that, what is your opinion on the Isle of Man TT? You know, as it's the Haslam family.
Yeah, obviously my dad's won it twice, you know.
Yeah, exactly,
Back in the day, it was a world championship. It's something that you had to do. And I think nowadays it's a little bit different. I've so much respect for, you know, I've been on the phone to Hutchie this week about catching up with cycling and the passion that them guys have, and your McGuinnesses and your Hickmans and all these sort of people. It's phenomenal, you know. And when you hear them speak about a lap and, you know, what's going through the mind and all that sort of stuff, I can see that, you know, the passion and the excitement that you have. And, you know, it's not something that has ever adhered to me to like have that passion, because for me, I've always had the racing side of it, and I definitely still crash way too much to be going somewhere like that. But yeah, you know, for me, it's more a massive respect for the people who have that passion to be there. You know what I mean? And I think you have to have that.
Dom races the TTs. Yeah. He's almost at the 130 mile an hour point, which is 120,
pathetic, really.
129.7.
It's really cool.
So it's we've had quite a few of the TT lads on and the road racing, and there is something about them that you've just got to admire.
It's admiration of that passion, because you know, obviously I can have that from, you know, riding Phillip Island or racing Rossi or whatever it may be, but to have the passion of the island and what it represents. And my dad's took me around. I've been around on a bike. I've been around in the car, and you know, for me, just nothing computes. Everything looks the same. You know, I ain't got a clue where I am or where I'm going. And
have you ever fancied doing like Northwest or Macau or anything like that?
I go over a lot to the Northwest. I go over most years to the TT, but I don't know. It's just, for me, it's always been about maximising the bike. You know, the maximising your braking, maximising the lean angle, maximising the spin. And for me, the road racing mentality is not maximising the bike, but maximising the island. You know what I mean? Maximising the course.
Yourself, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like overcoming yourself, you know, insecurities at the circuit itself. So I think it's a different mindset, and that's the way that I've always seen it. It's just different, you know what I mean? And someone who's jumped
really
from one to the other, you know.
100% really good way of putting it, to be fair, isn't it? You know, fair play. They are summed up race, and they are.
And another thing when I've been kind of looking over your career at a glance is the amount of, obviously you've had a lot of teammates, but the
who's your favourite?
The people, of the teammates that you've had some like unbelievable names and characters and whatever, from like right back in the BSB days and the Grand Prix days all the way through. Who sort of stands out as you know, the most memorable teammates?
It's different, all different ones. You know, our teammates with Haga, you know, he was such a character. You know, at testing and practicing, he must not have been there. He just wasn't interested. You could tell he wasn't interested. You know, all those young riders want to show willing and like enthusiasm, and he just was at a stage probably in his career that he just couldn't be asked. But come Sunday, you know, he was the man. You know what I mean? His ability, the way that he rode, and everything else was phenomenal.
That's mint.
Troy Corser, probably the most funnest teammate that I've had. You know, we got on so well, and you know, again, off the track sort of fun versus his ability on the track. You know, the super poles, the one-off laps, and everything else. You know, it's just kind of explains itself. Recently, Johnny Ray, you know, who's been on the 6, you know, world title streak, to be alongside that and see how he works was phenomenal. BSB, you know, all of them, you know, even Lavia, even what he did when he come to the British Championship, never seen the circuits and winning it in that first year, you know, that was something. As a young rider, he kind of like pissed me off a lot, because, you know, I expected to beat him, and then he just come in and his steady approach of doing it was, you know, worked, and it won him a championship.
Well, had James Hayden on the podcast, so I've kind of had that story, but obviously from James's point of view, where he was due to be your teammate that year, and then was it like Albacete or something, where he smashed his shoulder or whatever, and then obviously Lavila came in last minute, and and that was back in the GSC days with Colin Wright.
Exactly.
How did you find working with Colin?
Colin's still the best team manager I've ever had.
I think I've heard you say that on another interview.
Just because he's on the same wavelength, and no matter what was going on, the issues that you had, there was always had to be an outcome to the problem. And even if you won a race, there was still an hour and a half debrief of why didn't you win it by more? You know what I mean? It was analysing every little part. And what I liked about Colin is that, you know, racing as a motorbike rider, you learn to manage people. You learn to manage if you're working with an Italian or a Dutch, and everyone's different. Some mechanics need a hug, some need a shouting at, you know, some, you know, you have to be diplomatic or whatever it may be, where with Colin you could scream and shout and have a blazing argument for an hour and a half, and then 2 seconds later we can go and have a coffee and have a laugh together. And that's what I really liked about Colin. You know, he got to the bottom of any issue. If he wasn't sleeping, if it wasn't, he had girlfriend issues, whatever it may be, he kind of was on top of it, which for me is why we got on so well. But yeah, obviously the relationship with Mr. Hayden and him didn't last very long, and obviously he got injured, and obviously Lavia stepped in, you know, in the early stages.
What was? Did you ever get like a massive bollocking off Colin, or
every week, most days?
what was the biggest bollock? Is there one that stands out? Or?
Yeah, probably the funniest one. It was the first year, 2005, and it was at Cadwell Park.
I think I know this.
Yeah, and I'd not signed a deal to stay with GSC for the following year. Lavia was going for the championship, and I was only fourth or something in the championship. I couldn't win the championship. And we went into park at the end of the back straight, and Lavia let his brakes off. I was on the inside and tried to like go round me. And obviously me being 21 or whatever I was, I just let the brakes off and ran us both onto the grass, basically. And we both come back on, and we were still first and second because we had a decent lead. But he come back on in front of me, and we went over the mountain, and I made the massivest lunges into all bends, and obviously it didn't happen. It didn't work. I lost the front, saved it, went straight across the grass, massive, saved it. But I rejoined at the hairpin. That's how far it took me. And whilst I did that obviously put him on the grass, and Tommy Hill come through to win it. You know, who was actually quite a long way back, and I think I finished third and he finished second. I got such a bollocking for that because it was 1-2, easily 1-2, and 2 massive lunges on the last lap.
Now, be honest, do you regret it?
No,
Good lad.
I said to him, and that's why we argued. I said, what do you want me to do? I said, what are you employing me to do? You know, I'm here to win, and I was trying to win. I said, he let the brakes off initially. I said, he missed a gear over the mountain, which allowed me to make the lunge. I says, yeah, it didn't work out, but I says, what do you want me to do? Just settle? He's like, yeah. I says, well, offer me a job for next year then, and I'll settle. And that's basically what I did. The next round, I got a contract.
Screwed him by the balls.
Oh, and I followed Lavia home. He was first, I was second. I did that for 3 races. I did both at Donington. I did it for Brands round 1. So he was first, I was second, all 3 races.
Was that for team orders?
Yeah, because I'd signed my deal. He'd offered me the deal. I was happy to do that. And then he'd won the championship with a race to go. And I remember saying to Colin, I says, can I win the last race now? And he says, yeah, you can. And I went and won the last race. But it was such a funny little scenario, because up until the point of me re-signing for GSE and the bollockings of me making these big moves at 21, it was kind of like a bit heated. And obviously then when it was all sorted and we was all continuing for the following year, it was actually, you know, nice. It was a nice relationship.
Was that really just a full-on turn in yourself as a career rider? At that point, you know, you're thinking, well,
it's a maturity thing.
That was a huge maturity thing, or was that? Or have you always had that? You kind of just was brilliant.
It's understanding what it was, and at the beginning of the year, I wasn't ready to win races. I wasn't ready to win a championship. You know, I crashed too much, and you know, and Lavia wasn't. He was consistent. He was fast, and he put himself in a position to win a championship. And even though at the end of the year, when I felt I could win at Cadwell and Donington and the last races, I was at the standard to win. I wasn't in a position to win a championship. So in theory, I should have took into consideration that probably earlier. But without a contract, I'm still riding for myself. You know, I still want to win and show myself. So he recognised that. So even though we had arguments, he didn't really have a leg to stand on, because until I actually had a deal for the future, there's no way I'm going to let somebody else beat me. And he understood that as well.
When you think of that sort of cohort of that time, and you had Johnny Ray, Cal Crutchlow, Tom Sykes, yourself, Shaky Byrne,
seriously,
Kawasaki's, Carl Harris was on the Hydrex Honda around those times, Lavila, all of
Kianari.
Yeah, I mean, what a time to be in superbikes. And when you think of like where all of, you know,
and it was also, which a lot of people miss, is that it was Ducati, it was Honda, it was Kawasaki, it was Yamaha, it was also Dunlop, it was Michelin, it was factory Michelin. You know, the factory Michelins was being shipped to them, you know, straight from France. It was a big war.
When we had Michael Rutter on, we were talking about that tyre thing, and he was saying 1 year, I think his team spent something like 300 grand just on tyres.
Yeah.
And
that's what his race school spends.
Yeah. And you just think like that is crazy. But obviously the whole sort of face of the championships changed quite a lot to sort of suit the times. And obviously with like we had the recession in 2008, and you know, if it had carried on like that, there might maybe be one or two teams that can afford to spend that. But it would be in a very diluted championship. So obviously they've changed the rules massively. And one of the new sort of things that they brought in was obviously the showdown. Recently, after this whole coronavirus thing, they've put out the rules for next year and the calendar and everything. And I could not believe the negativity towards the showdown. Like when I was looking on Facebook and Twitter and all of that, it was just this year proved that you didn't have to have a showdown. And the amount of fans commenting on basically the upset about the showdown being reintroduced. It kind of worked against you a few times, you could say, and maybe, well, you put in the championship you won, you would have won anyway, type of thing. What's your opinion on the
showdown?
Yeah, if it hadn't been the showdown, I'd have been probably 3 times world British champion. So obviously, I'm not going to say I'm all for it, but at the same time, it's the same for everyone. You know what I mean? You do have to take a different mentality into the showdown. And in 2016, when I went into the showdown leading it, my first year back to British Championship, and I crashed at Donington, you know, in the first round of the show. It was the first crash of the whole year, and it happened to be in the first round of the showdown. And looking back now, I didn't need to win that race. I could have finished second, but, you know, in the showdown, I definitely didn't need to win that race. I could have just finished second. So you do have to go into it with a different mentality. It can work for you and it can work for against you, but in my opinion, it does create this massive build-up going into the last round at Brands. It's more exciting, I believe, from the outside point of view, but it definitely puts a lot more pressure on a rider.
I was about to say, you're speaking as professionals, you know, like as far as the spectator side of it, it does massively spice things up. Massively spice things up.
Is that the most sort of sickening feeling that you've ever had racing, the last round of Brands?
You know, that 16 year, I wasn't too upset that I lost the championship. I was upset that I crashed at Donington because that was my fault.
Yeah.
The Brands Arch, I had a handlebar snap. I had little things that wasn't my issue. So I finished second, shaky. He was more consistent. He handled the showdown better than me. I think we both had the same amount of wins. So it was an even comeback year for me, and it was what it was. The following year, when obviously we had the brake failure, we had issues all at the last round. I went into the last round with a 32-point lead. I think it was the biggest ever points lead going into the final round, and I lost the championship. But not only lost it, I actually finished third. You know, Dean from Kawasaki, we were sat in the motorhome. I had a broken ankle and broken thumb, and he says, look on the bright side, you've not finished second this year. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you finished third. You know, and I didn't even know that I'd finished third that year, but obviously just had to jump off at 180 mile an hour.
If I could stand up and slap you, I would now. Have you ever had anything like that before? 180 mile an hour brake failure?
I've not had it as big as scary. I've had brake failure before, and I've got off really lightly. But, you know, at that place, at that speed, and hitting the Onco that hard, it was... I'm definitely counting my stars off that one.
That was incredibly raw footage.
Glad you weren't doing the TT in that day anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, but yeah, no, it is what it is. You know, you can always say, that lost me the championship, but it's kind of irrelevant. You know, it's everything that happens is you got to take it on the chin. You know, I've had other things that I've done wrong. You know, it's not just one event that loses you a championship. It's a cumulative of everything.
That specific year with 2017, so your second year back, it was a clear rivalry. I know Josh Brooks was in the mix, but it was mainly you and Shaky that year throughout the whole season. How is it? Well, after that crash, there's obviously that very famous picture of you coming out of the safety car brought you around, and you and your dad going over, congratulate,
getting carried over, very classy.
Yeah, it was
very
It
classy.
was a sort of great image of sportsmanship, and
Definitely.
even though you probably should have been in the med centre, the fact he went down to congratulate Shaky. How is your sort of, you know, professional rivalry with Shaky?
I've got a lot of respect for him. You know, we've actually been racing together a lot of years, and what he's achieved, his ability is, you know, he is Mr. BSB. You know, the championships that he's won, everything else. So from my side of it, yes, I was good. I crashed. I'm gutted. I lost the championship, but it wasn't even about that. It was about, acknowledging that he had won. And it is over all those races. It is over the showdown. So for me, it wasn't about even sportsmanship. It was just, you don't speak to your rivals through the year. You ignore each other. You politely nod your head and you do what you need to do. But at the end of the day, it was the last race of the year. It was done. He won the championship. And that's kind of where it was at.
Was there any sort of behind the scenes sort of mind games or anything going on that year, or was it?
There always is. It's always a bit of banter, a little bit of winding up, and that's the one thing I'm trying to teach my young riders now. You can't let others bother you. You can't really listen to anyone in BSB because they're pretty much all full of crap. So, but as a professional rider, that's what you need to use to your advantage. You need to play the game. You need to, wind people up in a subtle way. Some people wind people up in quite not a subtle way, which doesn't work well for them. But you've got to play with it. And
it
that's
is
what
like,
it's about.
we had Jeff Crust on and he talked about the whole this is a game, and it's interesting because sport lacks that in my opinion at the moment. Like footballers back in the day, you had to go to school.
Yeah.
Like Alan Shearer and stuff. You went to management, you went this, you learn everything about the industry before you could play, and it's like that's what you're doing really. And I think that's a brilliant concept. The fact that it's not just getting on a bike and banging in laptop. It really isn't.
No.
It's all social media and all this, and look what we're doing now.
And it was good as well after those 2 years of being back. The fact you remained in the BSB and were clearly like the star the year after. It sort of turned out to be you and Jake Dixon battling for the wins, but it was I can't remember how many your win ratio, but it was something ridiculous that year. The most sort of contentious thing really that whole year was the whole leg dangling
I
thing
love that.
at Cadwell Park, and I guess talking about
the podium,
talking about mind games and sort of little things going on between rivals. That was the biggest sort of talking point. Lots of comments on social media and debates going on about what the leg was used for. In your opinion, was it more just doing it like really exaggerating it to wind Jake up, or was it a case of you were actually trying to stop him from coming past, or what?
No, I think it, like you say, for me, I've got one of the shortest legs in BSB. It's like there's no way I can take the whole road up with my leg, and the way that I was doing it, it does look quite negative because I use my leg to throw my weight from left to right, and I only do it on right hand corners. It's not like I dangle out the left. And at obviously Cadwell, you come over the hill left and you throw the right leg out to change direction. And I went defensive because I knew that he was going to come past, but I also knew he was going to come past. It was I was waiting, so I did the move, let him come past, let him run off, and then went through. It was like for me, I knew that was going to happen before it was happening. The leg thing is what I did every single lap, and I remember me and Mr. Higgs having a little debate afterwards, and I screenshotted something like 48 MotoGP riders all with a leg dangling out in the exact same way. And I do get that it's a safety thing, but
what was Higgs's take on it?
He knows, he understands the riding style of it, but from his side of it, obviously there was a complaint, and obviously there was a bitterness from the other side that's why he didn't run off the track because of my leg. He said it off-put him, and that's why he obviously ran off the circuit. But from my point of view, if someone's leg's there, that's not an obstruction. If I've hit people's legs on a regular basis.
I was about to say, have you had your leg struck like that?
Yeah, millions of times, and that's just all part of it. It's the same as someone comes up close and hits your elbow or lifts you up with your shoulder. It's it's obviously not something you aim to do, but it's just a part of it. If the door's getting closed or whatever it may be, but the person behind has to judge that. And there was analysis of data and where I braked and everything else. And from my point of view, that's why nothing got said, because it was very clear of that situation. But yeah, from that side of it, it is a riding style. You can't argue the fact that racing and elbows down and the way you hang off, the way you use your lower limbs to lower the center of gravity now with your legs and obviously changing direction, it has evolved so much in the last 4 or 5 years.
Massively, the elbow thing Mark, for me, but you see, Brodel was doing it before Marquez. Well, Brodel was very, very chest heavy as a rider, but since Marquez came on the scene, but you see, Rossi had the dangle. It's always that trendsetter. Now, what was interesting about Rossi is that I can't remember what magazine it was, but they got him to he could do the exact same lap time with his legs firmly on the bike and with the legs. So could you do the same thing? Is it?
Yeah, I think so. The main reason I started it wasn't even to actually a performance thing. I broke my left leg and I couldn't push off my left peg. So as I was changing direction, if you imagine you can't push off your left leg to move your
Transfer
body over.
Yeah.
The only way that I could do it was to throw my leg out. And that was the only way I got my body to shift over rather than pulling on the handlebars. And
Actually, a counter lever yourself.
exactly. And then I found that that actually also lowered the center of gravity. So if your back end, if you're in a curled up ball on your seat and your rear is lifting on brakes, if you actually lower your legs down near the spindle, like Shakey's got quite a good style where he puts it near the front spindle, it lowers the center of gravity quite a lot and your rear wheel stops lifting on brakes. So you can see why the leg dangle's there. You know, I was using it not only for the lowering the center of gravity, but also I was getting it so I could change direction without having to push off my left side. And that's kind of where it stemmed from my side.
You see, like what I like about life in general is that you always see bikes can't get any faster, cars can't get any faster, things can't get bigger and better. Now, as far as I'm concerned, what can change in motorsport now as far as style the motorcycle? Because your elbow down as well, it's like, is there going to be any development in style, or have we reached a peak? Because when you look at bikes, the bikes are going to have to change drastically.
I think things are always moving on, aren't they?
Which is class, isn't it?
Yeah, there'll always be little things, and I think there's a big push on aero at the moment, isn't there, in terms of the bikes and.
Can you feel it? Because you've never ridden an aero down, like the wings and stuff like that. When you hopped on the new Honda,
have you back to back with and without wings?
Knock the wings off and on.
The Honda is variable and obviously the pitch of the wing as well. So you can play around with that as far as how much downforce that you want. And a lot of the time you want as much downforce as possible to stop it wheeling, but also that's going to create more drag for top speed. So that's your trade-off. So
as a rider, can you change that specifically so there'll be a different aerodynamic kit to your other riders?
On the angle of the thing of the wing itself, but the reason why MotoGP wings are so big and so massive is because they have the horsepower. So they want maximum downforce, and top speed is never an issue because they've got the horsepower because of the prototype engine. Where the difference is on a superbike, you're controlled with the standard rules and the performance of your engine. So you are compromising how much you want to reduce, how much drag you want to give it in a straight line versus how much you want it to not wheelie.
Right.
So for me, that's a key point.
So compared to Europe, now European circuits are traditionally considerably more open, faster. Is that not fair to say compared to the BSB circuit? Do you think aerodynamic package for the British scene is... Well, I'm trying to think of the word.
As effective.
Is as effective, yeah.
I think aero in BSB should be, you should have a wing the size of a house, because around Alton Park on a superbike, you full throttle maybe 7 seconds over a whole lap, because the rest of the time it's wheeling, it's, you're going over rises, you're going over crests, it's narrow, it's tight, so the bike wants to wheelie and be more aggressive. You've got no anti-wheelie in electronics. You've got a more raw power delivery in BSB because you've not got traction control. So to manage a bike of BSB is 10 times harder than a MotoGP bike or a superbike, because you've got anti-wheelie, you've got traction control, you've got all these things. So if you've got a downforce of a wing that stops this aggressive engine with no electronic control, a bigger wing, for my opinion, would be a lot more beneficial in BSB.
Which is interesting, because the Ducatis, when the Ducati domination took off, they really had such this dominant shape to it, didn't they? Wings this, wings that. Now BMW, they've brought out the new M Sport, haven't they? So that's coming with a wing package. The ZX10.
There's a kind of push for everyone at the
moment. Everyone's getting it,
it,
isn't it? So it'll be interesting to see how it goes, because Honda really bar the Ducati with the first person as a manufacturer bike.
Sure.
With that change. So no, it's interesting that.
A question I had for you is, when you went from so after winning the BSB championship and you went back to World Superbikes, you were joining the KRT team that won, was it at that point four titles back to back, so that you knew you were sort of going into a team with a solid package. Obviously Johnny is your teammate to sort of reference from. For example, after the first test, and say you'll have been 2/10 off Johnny or whatever it was it a case of, were you trying to change your bike to get to suit your riding style, or was it a case of you had to change your riding style to match what Johnny was doing?
No, I think that was my biggest issue of the whole year. It was, the bike was obviously capable of winning world titles, and it has been since I've left as well. So however Johnny has his bike, however they set that bike up, however Johnny rides that bike, wins races. That is an absolute fact. It's been proven for the last 6 years. And coming in from BSB with no electronics and coming into that package, it's like a dream come true. I'm on the winning bike. And most of the time when I had a 3-4 day test, I could adapt my natural style to ride more like him, which gave me a very good result. You know, sometimes as good as him, sometimes a little bit quicker, sometimes not as quick. But to figure that style out on every weekend with 2 40-minute sessions, and it's not my natural style, I was never ever going to beat him. So for me, that was what I struggled with. And more I tried to push in the wrong areas because I wasn't riding it how I should have rode it with that setup, is why I crashed, is why I was pushing and didn't feel comfortable with the bike. And for me, it was a very frustrating year because even if they'd give me a setup that would have suited me more, and even in their eyes would have been a worse setup for a performance, I think I'd have got a better result. And that was kind of where we was at that year.
For our listeners and like our viewers here, if you could simplify your style difference as quick as you could, you know, what is so different about Johnny's style to your style?
Johnny's very consistent. The way that he approaches corners is it's actually quite stop-start. He gets it up off the edge of the tyre a lot better. My mid-corner speed was always higher, and I actually always got on the throttle a little bit earlier, but also that was my biggest downfall because the bike wouldn't accelerate with that much lean angle because it didn't have the mechanical grip because I was on the edge of the tyre. The electronics was that good, it just wouldn't accelerate. So I would get to full throttle. If you look at my throttle trace, I should be 3 seconds under the lap record. But if you've not done a style that gets it off the edge of the tyre, the bike physically won't accelerate. So harder I tried, faster I went through the corner and faster I got on the gas. But it actually made it worse. So, and that is what I had to constantly battle for myself, not to go in as fast, to wait, be patient, get it up off the edge. But the feedback from the bike never gave me that. It didn't do anything wrong. So it just allowed me to do the wrong style.
Build your negative confidence almost.
And you look at the lap time, I'm still a second off. I'm only half second off. And then I'll do an in lap and I'm cruising. I've just gone the fastest I've ever gone because I've just not pushed as hard in the areas that I've been pushing in the wrong areas. So I got it. I understood it. But then to put that into a 2 40-minute practices to like mentally get up to speed and then to reevaluate what I'm doing wrong, to change it, to then put it into a race to do 22 laps. It's like
racing's a different kettle of fish.
I got on the podium everywhere where we tested before we raced.
Yeah.
But any time I went to a track for the first time, it was hard. It was a tough
I bet it was.
Yeah.
It's that thing of like consciously trying to do something rather than it just being like automatic.
Natural.
Yeah. And
now, Johnny breaks the lap record on his 3rd or 4th lap at the pits. And that's where he's at. He knows how to ride it. He knows his limits. He's been on that bike. And you know what he's achieving on that bike and that package is phenomenal. And
slippers, isn't it?
do you think anyone will challenge him for the title, or who do you think will be his biggest challenge? I should say
him.
I think the Honda's definitely capable of challenging. Again, if we can put it all together fast enough, is the biggest one. But I have full faith in the Honda. I believe the Ducati as a package, as Alvaro proved, should win. Again, that's going to be down to them putting it together. There's packages out there, top right with the Yamaha, that can win. If they can, it's going to be down to all of us putting it together the best we can, like Johnny is doing on the Kawasaki.
Is in World Superbikes, is there a good camaraderie between you and like the top riders? Do you all sort of get on, or is it very much keep yourself to yourself?
Yeah, obviously I've got really close friendship with Alex, obviously. I've been friends with Johnny for a lot of years. Me and Chaz get on, the whole blavity, all that sort of stuff, We've known each other for years and we've all got the same passion, and if we're ever in the same country at one time, or in Australia, we'll all go diving off of a pier and trials riding or whatever it may be. So yeah, honestly it is quite good, but as you can get into that routine of getting there. It's work. Most weekends I'll probably only spend an hour in the motorhome. Most of the time I'm in the garage, I'm with the mechanic. So over a race weekend it's tough, but if you do get like a few days off in between, then yeah, it's pretty cool.
And looking ahead for next year, what do you think Van der Mark will do on the new BM? Are you sort of expecting much from him, or do you think?
I think it'll be tough for him. Obviously I don't know the capability of the bike, but it's going to be a new bike. I'm talking about getting the most out of package and understanding it. He's been on that Yamaha a long time, so he's now got to understand something new. It might mean him changing, it might mean changing the bike to him, and that alone is going to hinder results. And he's not going to be turning up at the first round and breaking lap records on the first lap. He's going to have to figure things out. He's going to have to develop, basically where we are now with the Honda. I think, again, potentially it could be good, but if it comes together and how fast it comes together is the key.
It was really odd with, like, Sykes would be front row in qualifying and over one lap be very competitive, and then he would always go backwards in the race. Is that a thing of the, like, maybe using too much tyre, or is it do you think it's maybe the outright speed of the bike? Or I
think, Tom's style was like that on the Cowie, and Cowie as a bike is really good over race distance. So I think it's a little bit on maybe how he wants to set the bike up or his style in general. You can't take away the amount of super poles that he's had. But there's always a compromise of being fast over one lap versus being fast over 20 laps. So that can be a style thing. It can be a setup thing. It could be a fundamental thing with that bike. It's not good on old tyres, So that's the sort of thing as a development rider, you've got to kind of understand and figure out as a team to have the fastest 20 laps, not the fastest one lap.
And that's racing, isn't it?
And another sort of big part of your racing career is being doing the Suzuku 8 Hour. It's a race I've never been to, and it's kind of one of those bucket list things I would always love to do. And I know the manufacturers take it like really, really seriously. Huge crowds apparently as well over there.
The atmosphere is phenomenal.
Yeah, and you've had some like real outstanding races, wins, and there was that year that did your teammate crash or got injured and you had to do like ridiculous amount of time just yourself, like 3 hours by yourself or something.
Yeah, out of the 8 hours I did 5.5, which I think someone worked it out to be something like 14 BSB races back to back. So it was like that was the time that I spent on the bike. But
we were absolutely cream crackered when you came off.
Yeah, I was so dehydrated. I think I drank 9 litres of fluids over the 8 hours and I lost over 6 kilo in weight. So yeah, it was quite an intense year that was, but we got second, so it was all worth it in the end.
So how much can you hold in the height? Because you can get hydration packs in those levers, can't you? Yeah. So how much water can they hold?
Not too much. It's about 750 mil of fluids when you're on circuit. I think they're like 500.
They're 500,
so a little bit more than that only.
And how long were you on the bike?
5.5 out of the
5.5 hours off one of them.
Yeah, no, you do hour stints. The fuel tank does hours, so you do hour on, hour off, and the last 2 hours I did back to back. So it was that's kind of how it worked out.
How many times have you won Suzuka?
3 now.
3, and because there was that controversial one with the Kawasaki, wasn't there, where there was like oil down on the last lap, and was it the Kawasaki crashed? And so
it was in the last hour. We had a 30-second lead. Johnny had about half an hour to go. There was oil flags in the dark as well. It was starting to rain. And there was oil flags from turn 1 all the way through the first section. And they did 2 laps. And then Johnny hit the oil. Race got red flagged. And because we didn't get the bike back within 5 minutes, obviously Yamaha got declared the win. Even though he got red flagged as he crashed, in theory, he was still leading when it got red flagged. But then World Endurance rules is different to World Superbike rules in the fact that if it's red flagged, it's not like World Superbike where you have to get your bike back and that's a resort. In endurance, it has to finish. So obviously, because it got red flag and it didn't get restarted, that's why we got the win back. It was a different ruling.
Just a random memory. Were you involved in that thing at Donington? Can you remember when the flags came out and then everyone was crashing and there was a massive thing into like because weirdly enough, I was racing there a few years ago and the safety car flag came out and me and Taylor Mackenzie was leading at the time and then there was Coops and me. Me and Coops both passed Taylor at Melbourne and Goddard's and then we're seeing the safety car flag and when I watched it back on TV, the safety car flag was out at the Foggy S's.
Right.
And it was a very sort of similar situation. Were you involved with that?
Hold on, didn't you they rejuggled yourselves, didn't you?
Well, yeah, because
it was like look at you, sir.
I would never have known, but Coops must have had a signal off his pit board, so he waved Taylor through, and then Taylor was waving it, and like obviously you can't communicate properly, can you, in a safety car situation? But yeah, that time because there was
I actually got third because of it. I was 4th behind Sykes, and it got red flagged. It got red flagged at Redgate. So we all went round really, really slow.
That's right. Yeah.
Coming down to Melbourne Loop, for whatever reason, Sykes come over there like pinned under red flag and hit the oil, went down big. We all hit the oil because we was going slow. We was fine. We got back and he didn't get his bike back within the 5 minutes. So I got 3rd instead of 4th. So yeah, obviously I like that. I like that rule.
I keep that one in. That one in.
Now, there's a few. I heard you on Gas It Out a while ago, and a few other things. I think Taylor did a video once talking about it, about like sort of famous nights back at the farm and like
Carnage.
Yeah, and I think after World Superbikes, you sometimes have big like parties and stuff there. What is there any sort of standout memories or like funny incidents that?
Yeah, we've had a few wild.
Who's the biggest drinker? Who's the biggest lightweight? Who's the?
It's not even drinking. My dad doesn't drink.
Right.
But the stupid stuff that we get up to, like
Motorbikes.
not Halloween, bonfire night is like, it's been banned actually. My mum's banned it for the last 3-4 years, and people have to turn up with gloves and helmets on to come to our bonfire nights. And we had a full-on war one year, shooting rockets at each other, and I think that's what Taylor was talking about because he was there that year. And I remember a rocket going in some girl's bag and it completely exploding this Louis Vuitton bag. It was like, it was some fun times with that's my phone.
Don't mention the Louis Vuitton bag, whatever you do.
But yeah, no, we built a foam pit one year. Me and Taylor was just.
Is that for backflips?
We decided we wanted to backflip. I'd just come off the back of a broken leg, and the great idea was we need to do a backflip, so we need a foam pit, obviously. So I got a load of scaffolding. I got a load of foam off of Whittam. He's got a friend who owns a furniture business. We bought all this foam. We filled it up, and we didn't have any ramp, so we was getting so much speed on this BMX, and we were only just getting into this foam pit. So the next thing is, we need a down ramp, obviously. So we literally demolished the old static caravan. We boarded it out, and we had this massive steep down ramp into this foam pit. So yeah, it got crazy. Double backflips, front flips. You
done it on a crosser?
I've jumped one into it, but yeah, it's
you ever done the
heavy.
dirt?
No, I'm not doing to dirt yet. That's one thing. Ty Wolfington's done that, and he come on. We had a little bit of play in there, and then he literally took it to dirt. So I'm a little bit jealous that he's done that. Actually,
don't matter.
Your videos inspired us to do it.
Yeah.
We did it out the dodgy ends of Anfield Plain.
I didn't. He did.
Dug a jump. Sugar Tits is young in CRF 110. I learned the dirt on the pit
Amazing.
bike.
He just spent a day. I was filming it. He just spent a full day flipping himself on a pit bike.
Yeah,
absolutely annihilating myself. I should have rang you up.
Wolfie's done it on BMX and the little pit bikes, and I think Alex has done it on a BMX as well back in the day. But yeah, I've not took you to that yet.
Not yet. There's time yet, though. There's time yet.
We're running a thing called a Patreon. It's kind of like social media, but
I tell you what. Before you ask them questions, I've got one more to ask. Was there been anyone when you're looking up to them at a younger age and you thought, I would love to race against them, and you've beaten them? You must have names, loads of names.
Yeah, honestly, I was obviously my era was like Neil Mackenzie, for instance, and I remember there was a lot of banter. I was doing a wild card for the first ever Superbike race, and I think Neil had half retired but come back to do a one-off race, I think on the Cadbury's Booster of all bikes, and I remember beating him that race, and there was a little bit of banter between everyone, like would he beat him, would he not, and the fact that obviously him, and he used to race against my dad and his GP career, and obviously I'm really good friends with his sons as well. It was, for me, that was a nice little tick that I got in one of my first races. Yeah.
I bet.
So we've basically got some questions sent in for you, knowing that you're coming on. One from Sniffing Skid Marks. It said, this season, what would he take if he could only win one? A Suzuka 8-hour win, a World Superbike win, or the Haslam Race School reopening with a different sponsor? But yeah, Suzuka 8-hour or World Superbike.
From a personal point of view, obviously I've won Suzuka a few times. To win, I've not won on a Honda in World Superbike, so I'll probably take the World Superbike win.
Right, there we are.
We've got another question from Lars Christiansen, which that sounds
mouthful.
like Norwegian, maybe. Which of your old race bikes do you own? And tell us about the Italiajet GP bike. Was it a POS or was it a good? I presume POS means piece of shit. Yeah. I don't know that one. But yeah,
let's just roll with that.
So yeah,
it was a massive POS, to be honest with you.
Was it?
Yeah, it was tough. It was going into World Championship. I think we blew up in 12 out of the 16 rounds and had some big seizure 125 two-stroke high sides sort of thing. So it was tough. I was only 15 as well, so my experience was minimal. My first year in World Championship, and it was definitely a confident knocking season, I would say, on that side.
At what point did you think, was it always just a career for you, racing bikes? From such like motocross, winning British motocross, and then just going straight into, like you say, you didn't really cut your teeth at anything on tarmac. You went straight into the deep end, like Chrissy said earlier. Was it always
Yeah, for
this
me,
is this is how it is. You know, I'm going to the top kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're
I
aiming
think
for the top.
Being born into Grand Prix with my dad,
Yeah.
that was like, this is where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in my head, that was always going to be. And we found a load of old little school books at my mum's place not long back, and you know, it was like you had to write what happened in the news that day, what you're doing at the weekend, and what you want to be in the future. And it's pretty much the same every week. It was like some crap that had happened in the news. I'm off racing this weekend at motocross, and I'm going to be world champion. You know what I mean? And that was like the
Simple as that.
sort of thing,
How was your? Well, he's a teacher by trade. What was your education like? Homeschool or like?
initially, it was paddock schooled. Tony Mang, who was 250 world champion back in the 80s.
Right.
His wife used to teach me. So I used to do a lot of homeschooling at a very young age.
Right.
We had some really good friends of the family. Mick and Pam Newell used to come to all the races. You know, Catherine as well. Yeah, they pretty much taught me and took me out the way of my dad when I was being annoying. So I had that up to the age of, I think, of 5 maybe. And then when I did come back to the UK, I was a bit of a nightmare because I'd only had one-to-one tuition pretty much all the way till I was 5. So I wouldn't queue up, I wouldn't, you know, be in line with other kids and all that sort of stuff. But my actual education at that point was probably better than the others because I'd had one-to-one tuition pretty much all the way to that stage. And then pretty much from that point, obviously I started racing, I had other priorities, but my last 2 years of high school, I was never there a full week. I had pretty much every Friday off, most Wednesdays off to go to Mallory practicing, and you know, I passed all my GCSEs, I went to college afterwards, I did a few other little bits, but again, my priority was only ever racing. I was living in Italy at 15. I had to come back to do my exams. That was kind of where I was at, sort of thing.
Hanging around Victoria's Secret models. Morning, ladies. Morning.
Do you still spend quite a bit of time out in Italy?
Yeah, I've got a nice place out there. It's somewhere that I feel that I can just relax. It's nice. It was initially bought just as a central place because the travelling got a little bit much. We don't get out there off as much as we can. I went out there last with a few friends of mine and a little bit of wakeboarding. Cycling's amazing. You know, food's awesome. So yeah, it's somewhere that I can go and not have the day-to-day, you know, issues as such, you know, and chores.
Is the pizza better in Italy?
100%, I know. I've got to agree.
That's that. Have you got any more questions from the patrons?
Yeah, one last one.
Awesome.
Obviously, you mentioned that your dad wasn't very pushy in terms of pushing you into the sport, even though he'd had such a great career and like loved it so much and so passionate. Do you think any of your kids will get into racing, and are you sort of actively pushing them forward or against it? Or?
I'm not pushing at all. You know, both my kids now have tried bikes. They've had little QR50s and little Ossets and whatever else. But you know, for me, racing has to be an own desire. You know, and at the minute they don't have that interest, which I'm not too worried about. You know what I mean? For me, it's about them being happy. About you know, if they choose it, I'll support it. But from my side of it, I really don't want to be that dad that pushes them into something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, like I said, like going back to that documentary, sorry, needs, like that definitely comes across from your dad. You know, it's like not the pushy element, but when you grow up in an environment, let's be honest, you probably can see it happening. Do you think, or
maybe, you know, even though my dad are really, really close, you know, our only conversation is basically bikes. It's racing. It's an everyday thing. It's not a job for us. You know, every morning he'll be getting up and he'll be in his shed building something, making an exhaust, doing an ignition and dynoing or whatever it may be, and vice versa. We've, you know, bought a load of old scooters and we'll race them around the field one week. You know what I mean? And that, it's always been racing, competition, bikes, and that's the way he's always been. That's the way I've always been. And you know, if they get that same passion and role as well, you know, they've got their own things going on, you know, with gymnastics and swimming and football and whatever else that they're doing. So, you know, we'll see where it goes.
You'd definitely be richer if he becomes a footballer anyway. So there you are. Just keep the boots on your feet. So he had an opportunity of being a footballer, you know.
I heard you was pretty good, actually.
I know, like he picked a poor man's sport of motorcycle.
Definitely a better sport. You used to play football, I think, as well.
Yeah, mainly Sunday league though, like the rough and ready one.
Nutting people in that.
To be fair, we haven't really got the physics for. Well, that's what you're stocky, but
I was about to say, I thought you wouldn't, like, when you watch that. I keep referring back to that documentary. You walk in like Conor McGregor. You were a big, for a motorcycle racer. You've lost a lot of weight. You're thinner. But when you watch that documentary, you're a big lad, bouncing out the weight. So
I do struggle with that. You know, my main training is to be smaller and lighter all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, my weight now is probably heavier than I was then, believe it or not. But you know, it's a thing that as you get older, it fluctuates a lot more. But I always have my fighting weight as such, which I'll always achieve when I go into racing. But you know, from a muscle point of view, you don't necessarily need that muscle. You know, from my side of it, I don't touch weights too much, but I tend to build up quite quick. So
just when to be honest, it is distinctive on that like documentary. You know, when you're speaking to other riders and stuff, you look like a power lifter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like anyone come near you, just
That's
boom them off
my
the
next
track.
career. I'm doing some powerlifting.
Well, there we are. You heard it, thirsty on chasing the race. And
Well, last question, and we'll get things wrapped up. What's Bautista like to work with?
It's got so much experience. It's been a little bit hard because, obviously him coming off the Ducati winning, it's been a tough, I would say early stages of the project. And like I say, initially I've been quicker at a lot of the tests, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not been fast. He's been pretty much in his development stages, and as have I. And as the season's gone on race day, he's, the level that he goes at on a Sunday is definitely another step up from where he has been in testing and practice. So, from my side of it, I know how competitive he is. His experience is just phenomenal. And the good thing that I like about him as a teammate is that we're very open with what we think about the bike, and also we're pretty much on the same wavelength. So it's nice to have someone pushing in the same direction. And when you're getting the same results week in, week out and fighting, it all kind of, makes sense that everyone's pushing in the same direction, which is nice, because I've had the opposite and it can be difficult.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Now, are you and Bautista doing Suzuka?
It's not decided, the team. Obviously,
I'm available.
Alvaro's never done Suzuka, so
Has he not?
no. So maybe if he wants to do it, then maybe a good opportunity for him.
Yeah.
Especially with his race rhythm, it'll be be a good teammate.
I think my final question is: if you had to pick one Lowe's twin, which one would you keep?
That's a tough one. That
We're not letting you out till you answer it.
me and Sam's on a similar wavelength, and the fact that we don't race each other, I think we get on so it's a little bit easier. Me and Alex we're really, really good friends, and I'd do anything for him. But we also have got that little rivalry, so I'd keep Sam at the minute, and we'll leave Alex out to dry.
Fantastic. Well, we'll have to interview them next, so this is going to be good.
Well, thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate you coming on the show, and obviously best of luck for the season this year.
Yeah.
And with your racing and obviously the academy and everything as well. So yeah, thanks so much, and massive thanks to our sponsor, Colchester Kawasaki. It was funny when I messaged you the other day. You were at a work thing with Luke from Colchester Kawasaki, just by pure coincidence. But huge thanks to Colchester Kawasaki and our patrons. We'll catch up soon, and take care.
Cheers, now.
Cheers.
Click, buy, deliver with the 2-time Motorcycle News Dealer of the Year, Colchester Kawasaki. Proud sponsors of Chasing the Racing.